Perfect. Welcome, everyone. Hello, happy Thursday, everybody. We're just a minute past, but we're going to wait a little bit, just another minute, while we have everybody sort of come in and join us today. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. Nice to see everybody. Perfect. All right. So while we have folks sort of trickle in, we're just 2 minutes past now. I think we could probably get started, just so I want to make sure our lovely speakers today have enough time to share their presentation. So let's get started here. So my name is Hannah Holmes, pronouns she and her. I am the project coordinator at PLEAC, the Public Legal Education Association of Canada. In the spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge that I am located here in Toronto, Ontario, on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I would also like to bring everyone's attention to the upcoming National Day for Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th. This will be a day for education and reflection to acknowledge the tragic legacy of residential schools and the children who sort of never made it home, and to commemorate survivors and their families as well. So please continue to educate yourselves, participate, and give wherever you can. Today, we are very excited to hear from our speakers. We have Bree Lowenberger, Heather Haven, and Pam Kovacs joining us from the Law Society of Saskatchewan. We're really excited to have them join us today. I will let them introduce themselves in a moment, but just a few quick administrative notes. The webinar is being recorded. It will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. It will be on our website. The link is going to be circulated to everyone after the webinar is complete. So if you want to rewatch, or if there's anyone else sort of interested, obviously, in following up after the fact, we're happy to do that. There's also going to be a brief survey at the end of the webinar. Please take a minute to complete it when you can. And then finally, feel free to use the chat and the Q&A button and the Q&A function to ask any questions that you might have throughout the webinar today. And I will keep an eye on those, and then we will hopefully have enough time at the end to get to those, and any comments, feedback, questions, anything that you have, please feel free to interact with us today. So without further ado, I will pass it over to the presenters. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hannah, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bree Lowenberger, and for those I haven't met, I am the Director of Create Justice, the Centre for Research, Evaluation and Action Towards Equal Justice at the College of Law, University of Saskatchewan. And I'll be co-presenting today with my colleague, Heather Haven, who's an Associate Dean and co-partner on the legal needs assessment project that we undertook here in Saskatchewan. Our presentation today focuses on using multiple perspective legal needs surveys to improve access to legal information. And today we'll be providing some reflections on the results as they relate to access to legal information from our legal needs assessment. And so I know we have limited time, but we do want to provide a bit of background on what the Sask Legal Needs Assessment is. Took a user, community, and lawyer-focused approach. We'll dig into a brief kind of summary of the methodology of the surveys. Third, we'll provide some key legal information-related insights from our findings. And finally, we'll conclude by inviting your experience and thoughts on multiple prospective legal needs surveys and how that can help improve access to legal information. So I'm going to pass it over now to Heather to explain the impetus, components, building blocks of the study. Take it away, Heather.
Thanks, Bree. And thanks everyone for having us. So several years ago, Bree came to me and said, we really need a legal needs assessment in Saskatchewan. And so that's probably the impetus for the study, is saying we need to do this. And at the time, we were looking at, what we can achieve through a legal needs assessment. And I'll start back by saying we're often lacking data in our justice sector when we're making decisions. We often have anecdotal information. We may have incomplete information, incomplete data. And it's really hard when we're trying to make good decisions with limited resources to know what should we do. And it's particularly hard in different geographic areas where maybe there's even less data or information that is available that we can rely upon. So we started looking into various ways that we could get more and better information that was reliable. And we recognized that there was a couple of things, and this project tried to do both. We're talking about the legal needs assessment. So we did we looked at it and said, we need some way to capture information in terms of what is happening within Saskatchewan, particularly, because that's where we were interested. And we had to think about what stakeholders we would want to survey, where we would want to capture that information. So that was part of it. The other side that I'll talk about in a little bit was a data scan of what also exists out there for existing data that we could be drawing upon to help make good decisions. So in terms of the legal needs assessment itself, we also recognized that it's great for people at the university to be interested in these things, but we didn't want this to be another study maybe that wasn't operationalized, that couldn't be useful or implemented. So we thought it was very important for us to have a partner, a professional partner, I'll say, with that was interested in utilizing the results that maybe could help answer some questions that they might have about what's going on in the justice system in Saskatchewan. And we found that partner in the Law Society. The Law Society of Saskatchewan is our regulator. It regulates the profession, the practice of law in Saskatchewan, and it does so in the public interest. And so it makes sense that they would be interested in terms of what the legal needs are and how those are met or not met within our province. And the Law Society would also want to take an evidence-based approach to this. There was a couple of things happening a few years ago when we first, embarked on this conversation with the Law Society. At the time, they were launching a limited licensed practitioner pilot project, which is now, in various stages, but trying to understand the scope of services or the legal needs in the province could play into this pilot project that they were undertaking. So I think they saw kind of a direct benefit for a survey such as this legal needs assessment. So what did we do? You'll see here that there was various components to this study, which were intentionally aimed at trying to address this justice data deficit in Saskatchewan and help shape the future for improving legal services and legal services delivery. On a much broader level, we thought that what we other stakeholders, in addition to the Law Society, would be interested in what we may find out. For example, plea-related initiatives. When we're talking about access to legal information or services, we know that plea plays a huge role in providing those services in Saskatchewan and elsewhere. So plea organizations are we thought could be very interested in what we were finding out. The Ministry of Justice. Within our province, there is various strategies that they have been adopted to try and address access to justice needs in the province, whether These might be legal information portals, system navigators, or even expanding existing programs like the Indigenous Court Workers Program. So we really thought that there was some benefits to having a broader impact, as well as legal clinic initiatives or what we might do to provide other types of legal services or interventions to help in the justice system. So what did we do? The first thing that we undertook was a literature review, not surprising, looking to see what has been done and doing some background research on what exists, what already exists in terms of data related to the needs or needs that are being met or needs that aren't being met within either Canada or the province. And so we undertook, a literature review. We also wanted to design our study and our surveys with access to justice in mind. And in doing that, we adopted what we call BC's Access to Justice Triple Aim approach as a starting point. So we'll take a look at this in a little more detail, but we did think that was important. We then did a data scan, and this is where this is the other half of the project that we're not really going to talk about, but we did do a data scan of existing data sets that might exist in Saskatchewan. We had a lot of help from people within the ministry that were working, some students that were working away, and using other types of relationship. Pam Kovacs at the Law Society was helpful in that respect as well, to try and find out what actually exists out there. We tend to operate in silos, and I'm sure many of you in the organizations recognize that, but we operate in silos, and wouldn't it be great if we could actually share information, share data, so we weren't constantly replicating or operating in a vacuum when we don't have the information that could be helpful. So that was, part of what we were doing. In terms of the legal needs assessment itself, we wanted to take what we call a multi-stakeholder approach. So we thought there was a couple of ways to do this. Very often, legal needs assessments start from the premise of the users within the system, the clients, those that are accessing legal services, or those that aren't accessing legal services, that have not been able to do that for a variety of reasons. User surveys are so important. They're also very expensive. And so, given, our what we could do, we also had worked previously with StatsCan, and I think there was various groups that were working to try and harness Stats Canada's ability to undertake kind of a user survey, and they did that in their one-time general legal problems survey. So that was a huge boost to us, and we recognized that we didn't need to replicate asking individuals within the province about kind of their legal problems, but leave that to StatsCan to do that. But that was a conscious strategy, rather than, when you have limited resources, you're going to leverage what you can. And so that was a huge support. The other two aspects that we did engage in were a lawyer survey and a community agency survey. We thought lawyers were important because legal professionals are servicing the public, they are practicing law, and we thought they would have a perspective on gaps to existing provisions of legal services in their particular geographic regions or in their practice areas. The community agency survey was a little bit unique, but we wanted to, almost as trusted intermediaries, community agencies are serving various clientele, and they recognize unmet needs, be they justice needs or what have you, amongst its clientele. And so we thought it was important to get a sense from community agencies what they were experiencing and what they were experiencing in supporting the people that they were serving. So I mentioned the BC's Access to Justice triple aim as a starting point. If any of you have seen Bree and I present before, you may have seen this, or maybe you're actually adopting it and using it in your own practice. We have found this as a really great tool for a couple of reasons. It helps us both define what we're trying to get at in terms of access to justice by putting some language and framework around ways that we can intervene in a system to try and make improvements, system improvements, program improvements, or where we might want to intervene and what we're trying to achieve. So this has been really helpful definitionally, but it's also been important for evaluation on other projects that we've done, because it helps us to I'll say, identify where we are making improvements and what we want to evaluate in terms of improvements. So you'll see kind of the three areas or broad areas, that's what we call it, the triple aim, is improving population access to justice. So what populations are actually receiving justice? What is the, kind of socioeconomic impact that justice interventions or lack of interventions are having, who is receiving services, who is not receiving services from a demographic perspective or geographic perspective. So population access to justice. The other is improving user experience within the justice system. So this is really about what is the quality of the user experience? What are people experiencing or not experiencing when they're coming through a justice process? And so we think, even thinking about access to justice in these couple of terms is important. The other is improving costs. And I know historically, a lot of discussion has been around, well, if we just, things just weren't so expensive, well, let's just provide more low-cost legal services. That might actually be a solution in some cases, but in some cases it's not. But improving costs I think we can always do better, but improving costs is about system costs. It's also about costs to the individual. And sometimes improvements that we're making to improve access to justice might not be operating on the cost basis, but it might be, other things that we can improve user experiences or population access using different strategies. So we helped this to help frame the survey questions and what we were trying to understand about what was happening out in the province of Saskatchewan. I will say we also didn't do this alone. Our literature review was really helpful, but also the networks that we have. We wanted to build on things that are already there. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel on everything, and that's really important. We did build our study off of the OECD. I think it was 2018 had come out with kind of like almost a guide for legal needs assessment. So that was really, really helpful and helped in our thinking on this whole project. Of course, the everyday legal problems and cost of justice in Canada, the report that was a national study that came out of Ontario, and work that had been done. The Alberta Law Foundation had done kind of a smaller level legal needs assessment, but we were really helpful to see what kind of survey questions they were asking. And we were also very pleased to receive a literature review that the Law Foundation of Manitoba had undertaken. So, bringing these things together, you can't do these things, or things can be easier if multiple perspectives are brought to bear on it. And we are really grateful for others that supported this. I don't want to spend too much time on some of the background, but we did find in our literature review some things that drove us. We recognize that many people in Canada have experienced or will be experiencing justice-related problems in their lifetime, and that if we do a comparison, looking at kind of data that exists, about 36 of the world's population within a 2-year period will be experiencing a justice-related problem. And in what we had found in some Canadian data, that it was higher in Canada than what the world information was that we were out there. Some, not surprisingly, some types of problems are more common than others, and that issues tend to cluster and multiply. So if you have one unmet legal need, there's often that can lead to others and have a multiplying effect and cluster. So interventions, you know, of course, my mind goes to, well, then early intervention trying to solve that is going to have benefits in the long run. Not surprising, a lot of the literature points out that the social, economic, and health disadvantages are disproportionately also affect people with unmet legal needs, and that in addition to the personal costs people are experiencing, there are greater societal and economic costs with not meeting a justice-related problem or resolving that in a way that's beneficial to people. So we, when we think about legal needs and whether or not these, you know, what is an indicator, I'll say, of an unmet legal need, we're often looking at whether or not a problem is going unresolved, whether or not the situation then becomes worse if something is not addressed, or whether or not there has been some type of intervention to try and resolve a legal unmet need, but the resolution hasn't been satisfactory. So there's different indicators of whether or not legal needs have been met or have not been met. Brief too. And when, you know, from our base perspective, when we have an unmet legal need, there isn't access to justice. Justice hasn't been met when you have a prevalence of unmet legal needs in a system. So we recognize that this surveys that we did and the studies and the perspectives we got back are limited, although we think they're fairly robust, and we were pleased with you know, kind of some of our response rates. But you know, we don't want to stand on our laurels. More needs to be done, and if anything, we have, you know, identified some information, and now we need to even do more. And I will say, this is a little bit off the topic, but we have a chair currently who is the former Deputy Minister of Justice, but he's a chair at our law school for the next year. And he has been in my office several times and said his entire seminar next semester is going to be based on this study, because there is so much a richness in it. There's so many things to talk about. And he actually said, don't you just get frustrated when you read this? And you know, there's things that could be done. And I said, absolutely. He goes, but that's why, you know, we need to have studies out there and then people to use them to implement or use it as a basis to build new programs. So I said, there's more to be done, but you know, if we can make one small foray into this to help make change, we think that's important. I'm not going to talk too much because you probably want to hear from Bree in terms of results, but I will say we do have, if you read the larger survey, we've tried to describe the study, the methodology that we undertook. In terms of that, I will make mention of the public perspective or user perspective. We really think it's important for legal needs assessments to talk to users in the systems. Those are experiencing, that have experienced a justice-related problem, and what they have experienced in terms of meeting or not meeting needs. And as we said, Statistics Canada conducted a Canadian legal problems survey. It was kind of the first time they have done this to identify the kinds of problems, serious problems that people face, and how what steps they were able to take or took to resolve them or not to resolve them, and how those experiences are impacting their own lives. And so the Canadian General Legal Problems Survey, which should be available. You know, it was a Canadian-wide survey. I guess in the 10 provinces, they did survey, you know, a little over 21,000 respondents in 10 provinces, with a subset in Saskatchewan. And I will say thank you to the Law Society of Saskatchewan, who really made good connections early on with this survey to ensure that we got good data in Saskatchewan, and actually paid to get those results, you know, specifically for Saskatchewan. So again, I can't say enough about how important it is to have good partners in this that can use their influence and sometimes their money to make things happen and get you know, influence how things might be done at different levels. And this was a good example of it, where we could get good information about what is happening in Saskatchewan, particularly with respect to the general population in Saskatchewan, but also the Indigenous population in Saskatchewan, respondents with disabilities, and also if there were gender specific issues facing, you know, men, women, LGBTQ to us. So we were really really thankful that that was able to occur. We also thought the community agency perspective was important because they are frontline workers, and because they have good geographic representation across the province. We did, the survey design for this was kind of interesting. We did try very hard to identify the community agencies that are operating across our province, and geographic representation of those community agencies was important because we wanted to know what was happening geographically. So often legal needs surveys, it's easy to get data from what's happening in the cities, but rural and remote areas are harder. And so this was one way we thought we could do that. And one way we thought we could get information, even if there aren't legal or lawyers that we could survey to ask what's happening in certain parts of the province, or insufficient lawyers for us to do that. We thought the community agencies had a good perspective. And so we did, you know, follow kind of census information and identify, you know, certain cities and towns in the province, and try to get good geographic representation from our community agencies. And I would say ultimately we decided on sending out directly surveys to 89 agencies. 49 individuals completed that response, which are those surveys, which was about 55% response rate, which in our opinion was actually a pretty excellent response rate from those groups. Oh, pardon me, 49 individuals, 67 responses in total. That's actually not 55%. That's actually higher. Pardon me. So we thought that so that was pretty great. I will just speak briefly. We also did a lawyer survey, and it's a little bit difficult when you go to insiders like lawyers, because there is a bit of a fear that they don't actually know what's going on. But we were pleasantly surprised, I think, by some of the insights that we received back. But there was 2 reasons to go to the lawyers. They are frontline, they live in community, and they have perspectives on that. And this was also a bit of engaging lawyers in a culture shift. Even by asking the questions, participating in the survey, they're having to actually turn their mind to met and unmet legal needs within the practice areas, within their geographic areas. And if we want people within the justice system to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, I think you have to bring them into the tent and listen to their perspectives. And if there is differences between what the community agencies are saying or what users are saying and what legal professionals are saying, well, then we need to address that and see how we can continue to work in the public interest to ensure that those needs are met. So we did do a lawyer survey. again, paid attention to various aspects of who we were surveying, or at least who was responding to our survey. And we had to shift a little bit in terms of trying to get response rates back. We did try to send things out on listservs. And we did have some response back, but we found we actually went back a little bit to square one and identified and ended up sending out individual surveys to specific lawyers using a method of a directory on find legal assistance, and ended up having a much higher response rate than we could have achieved otherwise, and we're really pleased with that. That was able to work so well. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Bree, who's going to talk a little bit about some of our insights.
Thanks so much, Heather. So I'm starting off my remarks here with a quote that has kind of guided how we thought about this project and are now implementing the results. The best ideas emerge when very different perspectives meet. So here we go. So we've talked about the what, and I'm going to take a couple minutes to delve into the so what and now what. The reports are hundreds of pages long. They're packed with, I'm biased, but some really helpful and interesting insights. And so today I'm here to try to help summarize some of those insights, especially as they relate to legal information and education. And so I'm going to spend my time looking at sharing some of the general findings, some of the multiple perspectives, so what lawyers, community-based organizations, and the public had to say about access to legal information and education. And I'll end with some suggestions for improving legal information and education that came up in the reports. And locally, we, as some of you will be aware, have our Saskatchewan Access to Legal Information initiative, which is alongside, of course, our Public Legal Education Association and other committed legal information and education providers in Saskatchewan, some key vehicles for change. So the report found that legal information access is a top 5 legal need. Individuals require access to general information about their legal problem in the justice system, as well as how to go about addressing the problem. A large proportion of respondents from community-based organizations, 60%, and lawyers, 46%, agreed that people faced with a justice-related problem are only sometimes able to obtain effective legal information. And so this really highlights the importance of public legal education providers' work. This wasn't overly surprising to us, as this is the critical kind of first step in addressing unmet needs. But I'll moving on to specific feedback from our different respondents. I'll first share some insights from our community-based organizations. And so community-based organizations offered a number of suggestions related to the themes we identify on the screen. So representatives of CBOs reported that people faced with justice-related problems are sometimes or rarely, that was 60% and 27% respectively, able to obtain effective legal information. And so these include what's shared on the screen. I'm going to share some quotes directly. I find most interesting the kind of qualitative information from the responses. So I'll go through a couple responses related to each of these themes. So legal supports clients need, information and mediation, access to information regarding self-representation, information regarding family law and immigration, access to suitable, relevant, prepared resources, supported literacy education for prevention, transparency on principles of justice, access to information and context within the process, proper information and guidance at the right time by legal aid lawyers, clear information, structure fees and how they're billed, and an understanding of how the legal system works, and information on court appearances and understanding procedures. And finally, just access to information on supports. When it came to suggestions regarding access to general information, consultation, and guidance, we heard that there's a need for more information on domestic violence and mental health and addictions, information on how to go about separations, dismissals from employment, assistance in using a computer, assistance in locating related information on the internet. So speaking to a key topic I know that's talked about within this group, trusted intermediaries and community workers, a real focus throughout these themes on the importance of that supported assistance and help in locating and looking at legal information. When it comes to suggestions to better serve underserved demographic groups, we heard suggestions such as education and awareness of the laws, which resources are available near the community. So a real community-based focus on accessing legal information. Legal information should be shared through familiar sources such as social media, where people turn to get their news, and more education and distribution of resources available. When it came to increasing public knowledge, provide pamphlets and information to deal with legal problems, more information on how to access what's available in general, more legal information and assistance with completing quasi-legal documents, clear and updated resource information to law firms so they can pass it on to clients who are unable to retain their services because of language or financial barriers. And finally, up-to-date and clear information such as directories of resources law firms can direct individuals to. Finally, in relation to strategies to increase accessibility to legal supports for marginalized groups, again, this really highlights the importance of trusted intermediaries and community workers. There should be efforts to increase awareness of available supports and services to manage legal problems. Example, through online platforms, organizations people frequent, and other readily accessible outlets. And then implementation of community-based services with qualified personnel dedicated to providing individuals with various legal matters, basic assistance, guidance to the appropriate legal information, advice, and representation. So I wanted to spend some time, there were some really great insights from community-based organizations, and I've also pulled some lawyer perspectives. And so some of these perspectives related more to areas of law. So what we heard was that on family law information, one comment was in order to address a lack of easily accessible information to assist those unfamiliar with court processes, maybe when a petition is issued, for example, information about how to access legal services should accompany the documents being served. And so scattered throughout, the report are, some more general, but also some quite specific suggestions that, are not necessarily Saskatchewan specific. And in looking at these various perspectives, really unearthed kind of the gaps when it comes to what lawyers may see versus what community-based organizations may see and what the public itself experiences. Moving on to some housing related feedback, one comment among several lawyers said, I think assistance should be available to both tenants and landlords, especially self-help kits and information. And finally, just one example of what we heard on general client information and needs. They need legal information tailored to their needs. They need someone to, again, listen to them, and they need someone to help them prioritize what issue needs to be sorted out first and second, etc. And one person had said most of our clients in this regard benefit greatly from a legal coaching approach. Interestingly, lawyers specified that clients often needed legal information from lawyers, not community resources, because it's tailored and more helpful. So that was their perspective. They said extensive legal information and sometimes legal advice and education on the legal system in general, the potential outcomes and the resources available. And so this to me really highlights the good existing work of public legal education and information providers, and just very much the ongoing need and funding for public legal education providers in offering both resources and then those who offer kind of the trusted intermediary help for people to access the resources. And I pulled just one kind of example from the Stats Canada survey. So the public goes to the internet for legal information. That was a key statistic found in Saskatchewan in terms of where people go for help. And that won't be surprising, I'm sure, to anyone on this call. And so I'm going to end with some suggestions that we heard from these different groups in terms of improving public legal information and education. And there were three key areas. In first, increasing accessibility of public legal information. People offered suggestions such as free clinics, create pamphlets, written resources, again, speaking to the ongoing need for tangible pamphlets as well as online information. Allow individuals to consult with lawyers or other trained service providers and ask questions, and fund advocacy networks. When it came to sharing of public legal information, it was suggested to share such information directly with community organizations so they can assist clients, share information online and in the media, have directories of publicly available information, also resources to help self-represented litigants, especially in crafting, things like criminal defenses, information in the appropriate language so all can access. And I know locally our Public Legal Education Association has done a great job on our Newly site, encouraged community advocacy networks again. And finally, on the public legal education front, education on the legal system and how it works, on potential outcomes of legal processes, on alternative processes available, dispute resolution and alternative measures, and finally on resources which are available in the community. So in terms of what's next, as Heather mentioned, there's a small army of us and hopefully a larger one with some of the classes and other initiatives that'll be vehicles for change, looking at the results and focusing on impact. We hope to continue to use the A2J measurement framework to inform how we're looking at both the findings and implementation of those findings to make sure that user perspective continues to be involved in implementation and that we're considering costs and population access to justice. On the data front, when it came to the other report we didn't focus on today, we're in the process of planning a data symposium that focuses on next steps with that work. again, through Sally and PLEAC, we're looking to partner with our fellow organizations working on these topics there. And we're also looking to integrate what we've learned through the legal needs assessment with what we've now learned through a project that was funded through the McLaughlin Fund on communication of legal information, which findings we're hoping to share very soon with this community and others. Had to throw the quote in again. Best ideas emerge when very different perspectives meet. We have no shortage of suggestions for next steps. And as we close with some time for questions and comments, Heather and I would like to put it to the group today in terms of learning how others have used legal needs surveys to capture multiple perspectives and taking into account multiple perspectives in understanding and addressing access to legal information within your communities. And so I do have in the presentation, which can be shared with you after, a link to the report itself. And would just like to thank you for tuning in today, and those tuning into the recording for taking your time to listen about our project. So thank you, Hannah and PLEAC, for having us, and I'm happy to turn the mic over to anyone that has a question, and to our colleague Pam as well, if she would like to add any comments at this time.
Thanks, Bree and Heather, and I'll be quick because I suspect there might be a few questions for the both of you, but I just wanted to perhaps say that from the perspective of the Law Society, we really see value in this type of work, and I thought I could give maybe 3 concrete examples of how we're benefiting from research of this nature and how we've used it in our own work. So one is, just as a regulator, we're constantly making decisions about regulation, and data and evidence-informed work really helps with that, whether it's around deregulation in the legal information space and making that more accessible, or re-regulation in terms of alternative legal service providers being able to deliver limited scope legal services, or even, and from this study in particular, insights on continuing professional development that we could be offering lawyers, and how their understanding of issues is also informing the way they go about and do work. We also benefit in this particular instance around legal information from thinking about how we can change our own website and communication materials to help the public and other community and justice stakeholders navigate effectively to legal information. How can we be a stepping stone to essentially getting legal information into people's hands, whether it's via our own website, whether it's via when you call our office and speak to someone. So we learn from this as well. And then, as noted through the Saskatchewan Access to Legal Information initiative with partners, we're looking forward to acting on what we learned from this study to better work together to ensure that the public has access to the legal information they need. So thanks for the study, very informative, and guarantee that it isn't just sitting on a shelf.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Bree, Heather, Pamela. Thank you for that. That was wonderful. I mean, we have, you guys were, you folks were really on time, so we have some time for some questions. Any comments? Please feel free, just post it in the chat, just as a little poke. But feel free to use the chat. Feel free to use the Q&A function if anyone has any questions, feedback, comments. Anything anyone would like to share. This is a good time. Thank you so much for the nice comments coming in. Just keep an eye on things. And if there aren't any questions in the meantime as well, like as we're sort of here today, I'm sure our lovely speakers would be happy to follow up with anyone who wants to sort of reach out with any questions that kind of pop up, or if anyone wants to connect. I volunteered that. You can say no. I just sort of offered that, but in the meantime, I do, folks will have access to my email address and can always reach out to me at any point. And I can put anyone in touch as well. But just taking a look at the chat and the Q&A, just give it just another minute and see if anyone has. Yeah, Heather, go ahead.
So I was going to also say, I know it's a little overwhelming because we gave a very broad brush in terms of what was, took a couple of years for us to compile. I wanted to say a shout out to a center that we have called the Forensic Center here at the University of Saskatchewan that was really helpful. Sometimes organizations and even academics, we struggle a bit with wondering how to do surveys, how to do these well, how can we get, how can we design things in a way, because maybe that isn't what we're about. And I do think we're a little bit lucky at the university because we have a couple of really great social science research or social science supports. We have the CHASER, which is the Canadian Hub for Applied Research, that helps with survey design and also administering surveys. And so that's really great. And so we often partner with other organizations outside of the university to help bring those services to organizations, not-for-profits and the like that need them, as well as I said, our Center for Forensic Studies. It's a great resource, and often finding ways to tap into that is important. So if organizations are looking to do something, but they're not sure what they should be doing or how they might go about it, sometimes, even if it's a phone call to Bree or an email to myself to try and, talk things through and also set you up with some other people to talk to in terms of resourcing, that can be really helpful.
Thank you so much, Heather, for adding that. Bree or Pam, do either of you want to add anything else in the meantime? If not, that's all good. I just I saw sort of the comment in the chat here. I have added in the report, the link to the report there. I will circulate it again afterwards for anyone who's curious to take another look, or who hasn't had time to look at it. It is a really, really fantastic report. So I appreciate that. And I know it's a busy time, so I do want to thank everyone for joining in. Thank you for the wonderful comments in the chat so far. So what I will say is maybe we'll wrap up a few minutes early. I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone's time again today. The recording again will be uploaded. It'll be circulated with everyone. As I mentioned, the report will be circulated again. If you have any questions, feedback, reach out to me. I will connect you as you wish. And I think that about wraps us up today. Again, thank you so much, everyone, and have a lovely rest of your week. We're almost there. So in that case, have a lovely weekend. See everyone next time. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bree, Heather, Pam. Thanks so much. Bye now.